Thank you, Diane, and Todd, and David, and Kent. Whew. Yes. Well, before we begin, I just want to give a shout out to one of our congregants who is up in Seattle right now, Renee. And so everybody give a big shout out to Seattle. Yay, Seattle! It's always fun when we know we're connecting to places far away. And sometimes we don't know who we are connecting with, because the only way I see anybody on Facebook, during the service is if they actually put something in the chat. So oftentimes we're reaching people we don't even know are out there. But we feel your presence. It's kind of like the Force. We are talking today about our 12 powers, our gifts, our spiritual gifts. And you may be wondering, if you're fairly new to Unity, what are these 12 powers you're always talking about? Well, I'm going to tell you about them today, briefly, because I could spend years talking about them. They are the foundation of Unity belief. It's not dogma or anything like that, but these are ideas, these are attributes or spiritual gifts that we have discovered, and not just Unity, but other people as well, have discovered enable us and empower us to create the life abundant, because that is what we are meant to have. Let's see how well you remember. Jesus' mission statement was, I have come that you may have life and have it. Oh, you guys are good. We became aware of these teachings in Unity when Charles Fillmore, our co-founder, along with his wife Myrtle, began studying the teachings of Jesus. A lot of Christianity is the religion about Jesus. We like to go deeper and try to discern the religion of Jesus. What was it Jesus believed? What was it that he really taught once you strip away the dogma and all the stuff that happened to Christianity down through the ages? And one of the things Charles noticed is that as he was reading the Bible and other sacred scriptures, he began to notice certain patterns. And one of the patterns was the number 12. Have you ever thought about how many times in the Bible the number 12 shows up? And he asked himself, what is it with this number 12? And he realized that one of the biggest uses of the number 12 was in the 12 apostles. And he said, why did Jesus have 12 apostles? He actually had a lot more. Many of them, by the way, before the Bible was rewritten, were women. And if you were here last year, we did the whole year on them. And we'll talk more about them in future times. But today, we're going to talk about the 12 male apostles and what they represent. They represent powers that we have, gifts that we use. And those gifts are, you can write this down if you want, you don't have to, it's online everywhere. Life, imagination, power, understanding, zeal, elimination or renunciation, faith, love, order, wisdom or will, and strength. Charles first put this forth for us in a book called The 12 Powers of Man, written way back in the 1920s. Later on, he rewrote the book with Cora, his second wife, after Myrtle passed, and they called it Christ Enthroned in Man. Out of that, we use these 12 powers, as I said, to create the life that we want to have. How many of you want to have a greater life, a more expansive life, a more fulfilling life, more peace, more love? And if you don't, you need to, for the rest of us. Because the more we grow, we help those around us grow. The more they grow, they help us grow. We are all in this together. We sang a song at the beginning of the service, one peace, one love. Yesterday was Veterans Day, and we honor all of our veterans. But I think the highest honor we could give everybody is to create no more veterans. To reach that point that every warrior has, is the world no longer needs to do that. But getting back to the service, how do we do that? How do we make that happen? The teachings of Jesus have been around for 1,600 years, the way we know them. The real teachings were around before that. And yet, we haven't achieved what Jesus taught us to achieve. It is because we haven't looked at the teachings. We've only looked at the person and then created stories around that person until we made it almost mythology instead of a teacher with teachings we can use. So that's what we are doing. We are looking at this and saying, how can I use these teachings? How have I used these principles and teachings? And you're going to have an invitation later to share those with others. But let's look at that number 12, why it's so important. Do you know the number 12 appears 187 times in the Bible? I sat and counted. No, I looked it up. Give you some examples. The first Kings, there were 12 stones. There were the 12 sons of Jacob, which became the tribes of Israel. There are 12 gates to the New Jerusalem in the book of Revelation, which is guarded by 12 angels with 12 stones at their foundation. The walls of the city in Revelation are 144 feet high, which is a multiple of 12. Now, I'm going to qualify that. In biblical times, they did not use the same measurements we use. So that's kind of more modern. There's 12 historical books in the Old Testament. Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther. There's 12 minor prophets. Jesus' first recorded words were at age 12. And of course, there were the 12 disciples or apostles. So obviously something is trying to be presented to us in these writings. And it's not just in the Christian Bible. If you look in other sacred scriptures around the world of other religions, the number 12 appears over and over and over again. So does 40 and 7 and others. We'll save those for another time. But what are these 12 powers? Why are they so important to us? How can we use them? And why have we maybe not been aware of them before? And why doesn't Christianity teach this? Charles Fillmore wrote in the foreword to his book, "It is not expected that beginners in the study of metaphysical Christianity will understand this, for this deals with forces that function above and below the field of the conscious mind. The average religious thinker knows nothing about the subconscious mind and very little about the superconscious. So if you are here today, guess what? You're above average." This tells us that really these writings are there for us to go deeper in, to not just have a surface understanding of it, or not just say, oh, well, the preacher says I have to do this. It's an invitation to us to look at these teachings and to go deep with them and to apply them in our daily lives. Which means that we are about evolving to a higher level of consciousness, evolving to a higher level of understanding, because we cannot change the world where we are at. Can I get an amen on that? Amen. Albert Einstein is quoted as saying, "You cannot solve a problem from the level it was created at." We cannot change the world from the level we're at right now. Not that we're at a bad level. We've come a long ways in several million years. But we got a long ways to go, right? And this is how we do it. Ed Rabel wrote, "Where before our powers have worked in the personal, as we grow and understand them, we begin to expand and work in the universal." In other words, as we take these on ourselves, as we begin to use them ourselves, we empower those around us to do the same. And people may say to me, well, that sounds like some woo-woo idea, powers. What powers do we have within us? We have powers beyond imagination. And Western science is now proving it. That when we engage in certain levels of consciousness, certain activities of creativity, we empower different parts of our body. When they have measured that when we are feeling great love for another person or a beautiful sunset or something, the heart responds. The heart has intelligence that can be measured. when we're feeling very strong, like we want to conquer the world. Remember in the Bible where it said you girded your loins? Well, guess what part of the body gets more energy at that point? Very good. Somebody was brave enough to say it. Don't know who said it, but I heard it. Was waiting to see if anybody would. Every part of us, every power we have has a corresponding part in the body. Our point of power, not strength, but our point of power is in the throat. Our words are the most powerful tool we have. And it is halfway between the mind and the heart. So when we are coming from intellect and love, we are empowered. So these powers are important. We use them every day, either consciously or unconsciously. And that's the point we're coming to today. Do we use our powers consciously or unconsciously? And I would say the answer is yes to both. Both. Think about a time where maybe you had an idea and you tried to do it and it just did not come out right. Let me give you an example. True story of something that happened in Manila some years ago. There was a guru who had a following of people, and he was in meditation one day, and I don't know what his personal life was like, but in meditation, he received the message, let the air out. Now, I would interpret that as breathe. Breathe into the moment. This particular group was very much into saving the environment. Good thing to be into. However, when we receive something, we're taking a divine idea in and filtering it through our human consciousness. And so his power of understanding was not involved. And he interpreted that as, well, cars pollute. And cars have tires that have air in them. So the best thing to do is to equip my followers with knives and stuff and go out and slash tires when they're stopped at intersections to let the air out. Now that sounds funny, but it really happened. And if you think about it, from that understanding, it made sense. Wasn't the best interpretation, I will admit. But that's what happens when we're not using our powers the way they are meant to be used. What would have happened if he had said, let the air out? Let me go into meditation. What does that look like? I seek understanding and wisdom. And we can actually call on those powers. Fill me with understanding and wisdom. We already have it within us, but in saying that, it means you're bringing it into expression. Oh, maybe it means to teach people to breathe, to meditate, to go deep. That's what these powers enable us to do. Let me share you a story about how I have used the powers in several times in my life. I could spend days up here because we all use them. But many years ago, I was a member of this church sitting out there like you are. And I had a very good career working in the material handling industry. I loved it. It was challenging. It was exciting. It paid well. But something inside of me started stirring. And I started getting this kind of like uncomfortable feeling. Anybody ever had that happen? Where you know you got a great job, you know your life is going well, and yet you're just kind of not excited anymore about it. And I worked on some great projects. I worked with NASA and the Air Force and the Navy and the mining industry. I had a lot of fun. But it just wasn't, something was missing. So I decided to go apart for a while, like Jesus did, and meditate. And I realized my soul was telling me it was time for a change. I had no idea what that change would be like. I just knew it was time for a change. And so I began opening up to it. I began using my power of imagination. What other kind of life could be out there for me? What could happen? And I watched for signs. I prayed and meditated for understanding and wisdom. And when you excite those energetic centers within yourself, answers come. And one day, I was at a small school where a friend of the family went, and they needed a substitute teacher for a couple days. And I said, I could take some time off. So I did. And then after a week, the owner of the school came to me and said, would you like to be a teacher? And my first reaction was, I don't have a teaching degree. Actually, I didn't have any college degrees. I don't have a teaching degree. But the first words out of my mouth was, what does it pay? How many teachers do we have out there? You know the answer to that one. And in a small private school, it was even worse. There were no benefits. The pay was not good. But my spirit, my soul leaped. And I knew that's what was mine to do. So I left my almost $100,000 a year job and went and $14,000 a year and no benefits. But it was the answer I was seeking. It led me on a new path, which eventually brought me to here. But I had to use the powers that are the gifts we all have. For instance, the first day, I was teaching a class of middle schoolers and high schoolers together. You can imagine what kind of chaos that was. I was not used to teaching the kids at that level. I was used to working with teens. But I walk into this class of mostly boys who were considered kind of rough around the edges. Actually, some of them were very rough. I was scared to death. Am I going to live through this? But I called on my power of strength and my power of faith. And we connected. And I discovered my passion, which was and is to this day teaching. That's why I'm up here doing this. That is how we use the powers. And I bet every single one of you has a story that is similar or even greater on how you used your powers to change your life, to go a different direction. Maybe it was getting the courage and the strength to speak to your beloved and opened up a whole new relationship. Maybe it was to start a new career. Maybe it was to move across the country and try something you had never tried before in your life. Something that everybody told you you could never do. Have you ever done something people told you you couldn't do? I'm a Taurus. We live on that. Tell me I can't do something? Oh, if you don't want me to do something, tell me, oh, that's a piece of cake, you can do that. So these are the 12 powers in a nutshell. And I'm not going to go deep into them because it would take way too long. But there's a lot of great books out there, and we generally have, I know Michelle Coleman, are you here today? No? Okay, well, Michelle Coleman, our licensed Unity teacher, just taught a class earlier this year on the 12 powers. There's other great books like The 12 Powers of Man, The 12 Powers for a New Millennium, Divine Audacity, and Power Up. I highly recommend if you want to read, don't read Charles' books first. They were written in the 1920s, and they're a very tough read. Divine Audacity may be one of the best in contemporary language. But those books are missing something. They're the theory of the 12 powers. But they are missing something we relate to, all of us. Personal stories. Personal stories of how people have used these powers to grow and evolve. And that's what we are embarking upon. That's what this ebook you've been hearing about is all about. Your stories. Why are they important? They are important because we relate to one another's stories. When we're talking in community hall or somewhere and you tell me your stories, it inspires me. When you tell me the journeys you have made through life, it inspires me. Just like when you hear a story, it inspires you. The world needs your story. So earlier this year, Helen Leal came up to me and said, Gordon, I have an idea. Helen has a lot of great ideas. And she said, I have an idea for an ebook of people's stories that we can make available to the entire Unity New Thought movement and anybody else who wants to read it. That would inspire them and help them see how these principles really, truly work. And so she's been working on it. And we've got some stories, but we need a lot more. We need your story because it needs to inspire us. You have a story. You have a gift. You have something to share. And I also realize that that's difficult because maybe it feels like, well, I got to tell the story, but I got to put in all 12 of the powers. Oy, that's a tough one. We'll help you through that. Helen's going to be back there along with Glenda and a few others who are going to kind of coach you through it. And it doesn't have to be anything dramatic. It can be as simple as how you use the 12 powers to plant a garden or go to Walmart. Sometimes it takes all 12 powers to go to Walmart. Let's be honest. And that's how we've changed the world. We sang that song, one piece in our time, one people, one story. But that one story is the collection of all of our stories, all of the chapters, all of the different ways we do it. Jesus said, you are the light of the world. Do not hide your light. Your story is part of your light. Your story can kindle the light in other people. So it may seem daunting to do this. It's not. We'll coach you through it. We'll work with you on it. You can, after service today, Helen and the team will be back there. And if you share your story, your IQ goes up because you get an IQ bar. And you all want to raise your IQ, right? I do. So that's what we are about with this. Sharing the stories. Because in truth, that's how we all grow. That's why books are so important. That's why we enjoy movies so much. That's why we enjoy coming together and listening to one another. We hear about how we use love and imagination and power and discernment and zeal and understanding, faith, renunciation, order, wisdom, will, strength, how we use those in our daily lives, even if we don't use the exact words. We use those. And so it's your turn to share your story because you are a part of changing the world and your story needs to be heard. You need to be heard because you are the light of the world. Let your light shine today. Namaste. Thank you.